elements of design and critical thinking, like that rolls through every aspect of architecture on a daily basis. Within architecture, we have project managers, we have project architects, we have project executives, we have lead designers, all these different facets of what makes up an architecture office. As a manager, I try to say, if we're friends at the end of the project, I did my job well. If we're enemies at the end of it, I failed epically, right? So that's one of the aspects of architecture.
Welcome to the SCL podcast, filmed in the MD Acoustics anechoic chamber at their testing facility in beautiful Gilbert, Arizona. In this episode, we are joined by Rob Huff, a senior associate and project manager at Jones Studio, an architectural firm based in Tempe, Arizona. His background in construction and a passion for transformative design play a pivotal role in creating impactful, beautiful, and sustainable spaces.
One of the questions we wanted to start out with is, as far as architecture goes, like what kind of people are architects? Are they creatives? Are they administrators? Like, tell us about that.
Yeah, architecture is interesting because, my first exposure to architecture was like the Brady Bunch, right? Like the dad was an architect, right? And he'd come home with piles of plans in his arms. I'm like, oh, I guess they just draw pictures all day. But what's pretty funny about architecture is there's a huge, broad range of what you can do with an architecture. I'm a project manager, but I also design. I also detail. But most of my work that I do is involved with kind of client to owner, client to architect relationship back and forth. But I didn't even know that was a facet of architecture. I always just thought it was, you just design, and that's what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a designer. I'm just going to be pumping out designs all day. But far from it. Like, that's maybe 10% of what I do on a daily basis is hardcore. I'm sitting there designing. But elements of design and critical thinking, like that rolls through every aspect of architecture on a daily basis. So, yeah, lots of different types and facets to architecture, design work, document development work. Within architecture, we have project managers, we have project architects, we have project executives, we have lead designers, all these different facets of what makes up an architecture office. It's and I love the people relationship. I love the coordinating with consultants. I love coordinating with the owner and making sure all of that chaos of what it can be in a project comes together in something nicely cohesive, and great relationships come out of it. As a manager, I tend to always try to say, if we're friends at the end of the project, I did my job well. If we're enemies at the end of it, I failed epically, right? So that's one of the aspects of architecture.
Yeah, so an architect isn't just someone that draws pretty buildings, huh?
No, architecture is not just pretty buildings. Now, so there's a huge distinction. So at Jones Studio, we like to distinguish between buildings and architecture, and even lowercase a architecture and capital A architecture, right? And so capital A architecture would be something that you walk into and you can feel that this space is different. Like, it's inspirational. Like, it makes you feel comfortable. It makes you feel like you can achieve something in this space, right? There's a big difference between a cubicle and an office that you walk into and go, man, this has got a good vibe, right?
Oh, yeah.
But if you were to ask somebody who has no idea about architecture and you walk into a space and they go, wow, this is different. Okay, what makes it different? They'd have no idea what makes it different. They may say, oh, well, this got good lighting and maybe it sounds good. Like, certainly those are good elements of good architecture, but it's transcendent. I suppose you could say. Antoni Gaudí is one of the most famous architects, and in Spain there's this amazing cathedral. My sister just went there and took a bunch of pictures, and she walked in there and she goes, "This is like another universe, like this sanctuary." The Sagrada Familia is the name of the chapel. So
still under construction.
Still under construction. As many years it has been under construction. I hope it never is not under construction. But it's fascinating. And so sometimes one of my favorite quotes is, bad architecture is obvious, good architecture is transparent, where you don't obviously know why it's so good, but you can feel that there's something different, right?
Yeah. I've actually heard that before.
Yeah.
And I've seen it when you go see certain types of architecture, like you mentioned, you kind of go into it and it just has a feel. That's the best way to say it, is it's a feel. And it just kind of, you can tell it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
What I would like to just kind of jump back just a little tiny bit for you. You kind of mentioned, the father from the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
Is that what did it for you? You were like, I want to be that guy.
That was the guy.
I want to have a bunch of kids and like.
I want that cool lowered
you want
living
that pit
room.
in the living room.
70s feel.
Like what got you into architecture? Was it something that you grew up like going, I want to design buildings, or was it something that came later on? Like what brought you there?
It's interesting. Like in mental science, brain science, psychology, we talk about left and right hemisphere of the brain. So there's one side is creative and one's more pragmatic, right? So I think I would default into a pragmatic approach. That's like my comfort zone. So I grew up with a software engineer as a father and an accountant as a mother. And even going out on the weekends of, hey, I'm going to go do this thing. Can I stay out past curfew? Their approach was, well, give me a logical reason why I should say yes to that. And so it was a logic, pragmatic approach, not an emotional standpoint, right? There was no gut feel. It was very much like, tell me the reasoning, right? So that's what I grew up with.
How very engineering of them.
A very engineering, right? And yet, my older sister, she's an amazing painter, and she has the other side where she defaults into the emotion and the art side of things. And I would say architecture is like that perfect synthesis between pragmatism and artistic expression. If it's done right, capital A architecture is that perfect synthesis. Most buildings in the world, all of our office buildings and most of the housing in the world is the pragmatic. What's the cheapest way I can get this building out to make money, right? And so I kind of came into thinking I was going to be an engineer. And so I did my first 2 semesters doing some Java classes. Oh my gosh, talk about horrible. Like it was the worst. So computer programming, not my cup of tea. So, did community college, kind of started off with that. And one day, and of course, listen to your mothers. One day my mom was like, have you thought about architecture? And I was like, no, that's weird. Why would I do that? And at the time I was actually working for a window tinting company. And that's what was putting me through kind of the first couple of years of school. And that particular company somehow knew all these architects. And I would get into all these really famous architects' houses. For anybody that knows anybody about architects, Arizona architects, I knew Will Bruder, who is a super famous Arizona architect, Wendell Burnett, Jack DeBartolo, all these really famous Arizona architects before I was even in architecture school. And come to find out, I hadn't met Eddie Jones, who I work for now, but I got into one of his most famous houses that nobody gets into. This is a person that 2 lawyers out of Chicago. They have one of the largest pre-Columbian exhibits in their basement of artifacts. It's fascinating, but it's a black box. Nobody goes in. Nobody goes out. No, nobody goes in this house. And because we had the contract to work on some window film in that house, I got up not only into the house, but I got up into their 2nd level bedroom that nobody goes into. And I had like an ethereal experience. I was like, what is this? Like, I've never seen anything like this. Like, who made this? And so that cemented in my like soul, like, there's something beautiful that can come out of like rigor and really beautiful design, not just making something that works well, but it works so well that it's now the form of it is beautiful. And so there's that synthesis between form and function, right? So that is all in the back of my head. Oh man, maybe I do need to become an architect and like do this. Like that was the aspirations. Fast forward, I'm working at Metro Tint still. This is the name of the company, that tinting company I was working for. And Matt Salinger, who also worked at Jones Studio at the time, he had since gone off on his own. His wife was still working at Jones Studio. She comes over to the office and says, hey, I'm doing this project. I need some window films, some different colors for this exhibit I'm designing. And I had just started architecture school, trying to get into architecture. And I had one of my models over in the corner. And she comes in and goes, oh, you do architecture? And I was like, yeah, just first year. And she goes, "Oh, we need an intern." And I was like, "Oh, great." Now, if you know anything about Jones Studio and you've been trying to get an internship at Jones Studio, it's almost impossible. Like, nobody gets internships there. It hasn't been part of our culture. More recently, we've been doing a lot more. But back then, almost nobody got internships. So Maria gets me in touch with the right people, and I go do an interview, meet Eddie, meet Neil, and had great relationship right off the get-go with them. And so I started working there as an intern. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Come to find out, I'm like snooping through all the old files, and then I see the house that I had been in, tinting it, and that changed my whole perspective on architecture. It's an Eddie Jones house. And I went, there's no way. Just small world, little like connection
awesome.
pieces. Like, so that's my anthology story of like how architecture like became something for me. I see this inspirational piece of architecture, and then by the workings of the universe, I end up in the same office that had designed it and worked through it. So
That's an
cool
awesome
experience.
story.
That's crazy.
Cool experience. Like, so that's how I landed at
Full
Jones
circle.
Studio.
And you're now hoping that same experience can eventually influence somebody else.
And I think that's a great point. Like, how do you how do you force that? You don't force that, right? Like, anybody who's gotten into these unique careers, if you ask anybody, like, oh, I just kind of tripped into it. Like, there's not like, oh, I knew from kindergarten that I was going to be an acoustic engineer, right? Like, you sometimes end up in places that you didn't realize that you were going to love, right? And so I'd say with anybody who's thinking about architecture seems to make a lot of sense. It's not an easy road by any stretch of the imagination. I remember, so I did all my undergrad at ASU, 4 years at ASU, and then I did my grad school also at ASU. Looked at a whole bunch of other universities for grad school, ended up sticking with ASU for a bunch of personal family reasons, but loved every bit of it. Started at ASU with 450 people in a class that all wanted to become architects. Mm-hmm. And that gets culled down over the course of a few semesters down to about 48 that actually make it into the architecture program for like the second semester of undergrad. So first question I'd ask is, are you passionate about it? Do you really like it? And then the second question I always ask people is like, what sets you apart? What makes you different? What life experiences have you had? Have you traveled? Have you been doing photography? Have you been building things? That was the thing that I think set me apart the most. And that Sam, you and I have talked quite a bit about, is like the thing that makes me good at my job as an architect is I actually know how to build stuff. Like, I know how to weld, I know how to do the woodworking, like all those pieces. And so when someone tries to BS me a little bit about something, I can say, no, that's not how it works. And so I think it's really important that you find something that makes you unique, and then you push that in through what your passion is.
Well, I think having that background of, being able to build things probably helps a lot in the way of when you design something, you're not designing something that's so off the wall.
That's right.
And somebody goes,
That's impossible
that's
to
not,
build.
That can't work that
They
way.
haven't designed anti-grav technology yet to make that work.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
That's
So because you kind of know the limitations of what certain things do,
Right.
you can kind of make something that actually does work.
Well, it goes back to what I default. Like, my default is pragmatism, like order, structure, frameworks. Like, that's where I default. But what 6 years of school and a lot of traveling and things like that have helped me do is figure out how to bridge over to the artistic side and find a really good synthesis in the middle.
As I say, it sounds like you've got a really good, and to be a really good architect, you kind of have to have a little bit of that appreciation for that art.
That's right.
Which you kind of said, where you hear people all the time say, "Well, art changed my life. It literally changed your life."
Literally changed my life.
But you also have to have enough of that side to say, what's logical? What actually works?
Absolutely.
What's in our limitations of real life?
If you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, yeah, but I'm not the pragmatist type, I'm more the artistic side. A great example of going the opposite direction is one of the people in my office that actually got me the internship originally at Jones Studio is Maria Salinger. She is went to England for grad school and did an art degree. And so she is one of the best artists that I know of. And she actually comes from the opposite side. much more artistic, and she's an amazing project manager too, but she's told me like, yeah, I had to develop that ability to like look at systems and look at structure and be more pragmatic in an approach of organization, but she defaults on the artistic side. So all architecture, I think, finds the synthesis between those two, and it doesn't matter what side you come from, as long as you can think on both sides of your brain and develop those skills.
Well, I think it's also important to be able to focus on that other side, because you correct me if I'm wrong, not every project you do is this cool design. Some of them are a pretty...
Do you know who you're talking to? Here's the thing. I'm just saying, like, literally, after having worked with you guys for a while, right? Like, I mean, honestly, you're touching some pretty sweet projects. I was just going to say, and for the listener out there, how do you, like, because it's like, I want to tread lightly here, because we have a bunch of clients that are architects.
Yeah.
But some of them are working on multifamily.
Yeah.
Right? And do you make multifamily cool? And then some other people are working on concert halls. Some are working on, various venues.
That's right.
Museums. So, like, is it the legacy of the architecture firm that gets these awesome projects, or how do you guys go about getting these amazing projects?
How do you not just get stuck doing like
you don't have to give
buildings?
us a secret sauce.
Yeah.
How do you get out of the cookie cutter and get into like...
You do it by rigor on every single project. You focus on what are the things I can control and what are the things I can't control. And most of the time, budget, you can't control it. And most of the time, your owner's own aesthetic desire and anticipation and vision for the project, you can help guide that, but more or less, they know what they want and they know what they don't want. You try to find those clients that you want to work with that, and this is good. Sometimes you have to say no to projects that it just doesn't fit what we want to do. I know from the very beginning, just talking with you, we're not going to jive. We're not going to vibe. And so you're going to be better off of going to somebody who's more used to doing something that's driven by the owner, as opposed to the owner saying, hey, we know who you are. We respect your vision and your capacity. Work with us and collaborate, and let's find something gorgeous. It would be highly irresponsible for us to think that every client that comes to us, we're going to do whatever we want. You just sit back and we'll figure it out, right? No. The best projects always, any collaboration comes from multiple people coming to the table, and you always find something better than what one person could have produced on their own. It's just across the board. So I would say that even when you have a client like the federal government, for example, we're doing land ports of entry. We won the National AIA Design Recognition, Design Excellence Award for a land port of entry we did in Nogales, Arizona, Mariposa land port of entry. You would expect that land ports of entry are just ugly. Like, they're on the border. What's the least amount of money we can spend to push the most amount of people in and out, safely and securely?
Lots of concrete,
yeah.
But Nogales is a great example of massive amounts of concrete, but used in a very artistic, expressive way. It's all concrete and metal and glass, but somehow some people can arrange it in ways that are beautiful, and some people put it together that's just, it's building and not architecture, right? And so we approach design on all levels, from the macro to the micro, from a large-scale 100-acre site plan down to what does this window detail look like? And are we just trying to repeat old details and do the easiest thing we can possibly do? Or are we pushing the boundary on everything we do so that even though the contractor's complaining about it and maybe the budget's straining just a little bit more than we like to, when it's all said and done, everybody's really proud of this thing, whether it's a site plan, whether it's a road, whether it's the facade of a building, or whether it's a window detail. Like, those are the things that we can be most proud of. And so if you hold that through the entire project and not just give up, you end up getting these clients that are seeking you out because they can see the difference in you versus someone that can do buildings.
Got it.
This isn't just another building with right angles everywhere.
That's right. Hey, right angles can be beautiful, but you got to have a reason for it, right?
So it's not like the buildings I draw where it's like square with a triangle and
yeah.
squares.
Yeah. But hey, let's make that beautiful too. It's all about the rigor of focusing on, like, what's the thing, where's the art in that building?
Where's the art in that?
Yeah. And if you divorce the art from it, you get back to buildings.
How long have you been at Jones Studio now?
Good question. So I've, if I mentioned that I interned at Jones Studio, that was between my undergrad and my graduate program, I interned there for a summer, and because I was already working full-time while going to school, which don't recommend, but it is possible if you don't have any other options. It's madness in architecture school, but and with the family. Shout out to my wife, Katie. She is a rock. Only possible with her there. So I do that, intern with them, and they said, hey, since you're already working full-time, do you want to just stay on? I was like, yes. So through grad school, I was at Jones Studio. So I've been at Jones Studio now for 10 years. That's right. Nice. Immediate employment. So I've been at Jones Studio for 10 years now. So this year was my 10th. So I started in 2015 and now we're 2025.
Congrats.
So
that's awesome.
10 years at Jones Studio. And I'm a senior associate there and a project manager. And right now I'm managing 4 projects at the office. And cool range of projects from a Jewish synagogue that we just finishing up and starting construction to a project we worked on together at MD Acoustics up in North Dakota at University of Jamestown. Yeah. We did Temple High too, the Jewish synagogue.
We guys touched them all, yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And I'm also doing a big land port of entry in Douglas, Arizona, and then also a master plan for a local private Christian school. So, cool. Yeah. And I've somehow become the church guy, right? So I'm all the religious or spiritual focused architecture tends to fall on my lap at the office, which is great.
So
it's so fun.
So with that being said, what's a project that was extremely difficult and had a lot of like setbacks? What were those challenges that you run into? Because you obviously you're not just allowed free reign to kind of do whatever you want.
Free reign and
right.
unlimited dollars.
So
right.
What are some of the challenges that you run into with doing these projects?
Yeah, so it's interesting. If someone were to say, well, what's the biggest challenge in architecture? We'd always say, the budget. I never have enough money to make architecture, and so I'm just going to make a building. That's easier. But I think that's just an excuse, honestly. We've had some very limited budgets on projects, and yet you can still manifest architecture out of these minimal budgets. One name that everybody has heard of recently because of his big flamboyant work, Frank Gehry. Everybody's heard of Frank Gehry. But what you don't know is some of his earlier work is the most beautiful, in my opinion. His work is the lowest budgets, worst materials you'd never imagine, plywoods and chain links that you'd be like, yeah, this is all garbage material you put behind a wall that nobody wants to see. And yet he uses as the primary materials, and it's amazingly expressed, right? And so you can take very humble, very simple materials that will be friendly with a budget and not import stone from France or wherever.
Sure.
And yet the way that it's composed is beautiful, and you can still come into these spaces and go, wow, this space is different. And yet it's got OSB on the walls, right?
Yeah.
One example of that, Wendell Burnett, local architect, he did a great library down in Maryvale, and he used, it was a Japanese-inspired tea house, and he used OSB, just the crappy particle board you buy off the shelf at Home Depot, on all the surface of the wall, but composed in a beautiful way, looked like a beautiful, rice paper texture.
That's cool.
And so, you look at these different materials and you go, oh, this project's on a budget, I can't do anything beautiful. Yeah. Again, I say, probably just an excuse. Think outside a little bit of, the box of, what makes a beautiful space. And it's not materials, it's composition.
Acoustical materials and anything that says wedding on it, they suffer the same they suffer the same thing of costing 4x what the same material would be.
That's right.
If it didn't say acoustic or if it didn't say wedding on it.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a good project that I'd want to talk about, because your original question, what's an example of a project that was really challenging?
Yeah.
And there's one project that so Valley Presbyterian Church is one of the churches that I worked on. That was an interesting one because that one was a budget struggle from the very beginning. It's a church, right? Everything is donated, and so you want to be very careful with any donation that is given to them to elevate that church. It was a massive renovation of a 1953 originally designed mid-century modern sanctuary. And it had all kinds of existing conditions that were and no drawings for this building either. So we're kind of guessing as we're going, doing some deconstructive exploration, taking some walls apart to understand what's going on with this. But they came to us and said, hey, we want to be able to do spoken word. We want to be able to do bands, like full-on rock bands. We want to be able to have the Phoenix Symphony Orchestra come, and they had a contingent of the Phoenix Symphony Orchestra come every year for their Christmas program. And it sounded horrible in the existing space. And so, with the acoustic conversation, that was a huge challenge. How do you overcome that issue? And then they also said, we also don't like the orientation of the sanctuary. We want it to feel more intimate. Massive 700 seat. How do you make that feel intimate? And so we have all these like design challenges at the very beginning. But again, with the right consultants, with the right team, we came in. Acoustics, we were able to overcome that.
What'd you do?
So that's a fun one. Because they want to do all these different music types and performance types, how do you do that with one acoustic profile? Because you've got the spoken word, which you want to have very dry. You don't want it to be super reverberative. But then you also have a choir with an organ that wants to be somewhere like 2.5, 3 seconds of reverb time. And so we actually teamed up with Meyer Sound and put in an artificial acoustic system, an array of speakers and microphones across the entire space, and they were able to fine-tune the space for that. But from the architecture standpoint, we actually had to reduce the profile of the room down to about a half a second. So it sounds great with just someone speaking from the stage, but if you were to put a drum kit up there, put a band up there, a choir up there, it sounds horrible, right? Doesn't have the reverb you need. And so we put this artificial system in. And of course, all the purists, I'm a string bass player, all the purists are going, oh no, don't do that. Like, we need to design this room to fit the profile perfectly. Let's let it do one thing really well. But this system, man, it is spectacular. Now, we didn't have that same budget for the choir room that's also attached to the sanctuary.
Gotcha.
And this is a great example where a challenge became a strength to the project, and why I'm actually probably most proud of this project as well, and also was one of my most challenging.
It works both ways.
Yeah. You never tell stories of all the easy things you do in life. You tell stories of the hard things,
Yeah, that's
right?
right. Where you learn.
Yeah. And so this choir room was interesting because we had this cool design of doing a barrel vault in the choir room. And yet, as acousticians, you guys know, that's horrible for choirs because it focuses all the sound in one spot. And so we worked with an acoustician who were constantly
you
fighting.
You can give the shout out.
We can say it.
Yeah, of course.
We
absolutely.
worked with Dave Cohn at McKay Cohn at Hoover. Great team. But admittedly so, the whole time we were just butting heads with them. And we were like, no, we want to do this. And they're like, yeah, but it sounds horrible. We can't do that. So, of course, the natural reaction, well, let's just fly some clouds into space and, suck up as much sound as we could. And in some collaboration back and forth, we came up with the concept of actually creating some dishes, essentially upside-down dishes, that we then arrayed across the entire ceiling. And so the barrel vault became an extremely good acoustic space, but we just had to think outside the box on it. And the great part about that design was you'd think, oh, well, that was really expensive. There was lots of products that Dave was saying, hey, this great product that I know of, and we were pricing things out. It was like $100,000 to do the ceiling. We ended up finding a local guy that we vacuum formed some PVC sheeting over the top of a form that we CNC cut. An MDF form, we piled up MDF, CNC cut the form, and the guy vacuum formed all the panels for that ceiling for about $25,000.
Wow.
And by the time it was all hung, that ceiling cost, I think it was like $40,000, as opposed to the hundreds of thousands of dollars that a normal ceiling if we were buying off the shelf. So again, it goes back to that idea of like, well, I can't do beautiful things if I don't have a big budget. Thinking outside the box, thinking of kind of new concepts, new ideas with the right team members, working in the same collaboration in the same direction, you could produce beautiful architecture that also performs well.
I love what you said there in the sense of like you see roadblocks.
Yeah.
But, and you have budget as a roadblock.
Always.
Right. You have contractors who may want to jack up the price or outside vendors who are trying to do stuff. But you guys and your firm and those involved worked around the roadblocks, came up with a solution that fixed it. And a lot of times in business or in architecture or anything, a lot of folks, it's like that's where you're made.
Yeah.
I think, like you're saying,
That's
like
right.
nobody wants to share the easy stuff. It's the hard stuff where you learned.
That's right.
So I just love that you're sharing this experience and that story, because it shows like to mentor those behind you,
Yeah.
even those that are in school, right? You were talking about ASU.
Mhm.
Sam we've taught at ASU a few times, right?
Yeah, I've taught at ASU for a couple semesters too.
For like these, not like full time, but going in and talking
Yeah.
about acoustics and this
Sure.
and that. And you see like the bright-eyed, they're excited, but they really
Yeah.
have no real experience.
They don't know what they don't know.
But
Yeah.
sharing these tidbits of information, like you're saying, it really shows, like, for the future generations coming up behind you,
Right.
don't only look at off-the-shelf product.
That's right.
You can, whatever you want to imagine, OSB, make it beautiful, right? I just love these stories. These are great
That's right.
stories. Thank you.
And it's almost always better when you don't default to off the shelf.
Yeah.
Now, certainly there's some places there's the right time and the right fit for it, but you can make just as good of space and buildings, I guess I'm using buildings, architecture, with off-the-shelf Home Depot stuff as you can with these high-dollar acoustic treatments or whatever it might be, wall finishes or whatever it is.
Stone.
With stone, yeah.
The imported stone from France. I like that.
That's
one.
right. That's right. I remember touring this project where it was during construction, and I was looking at this. I was talking to the architect, and gorgeous board form concrete. And I was like, "Oh, this concrete's beautiful." And he goes, "Yeah, we're covering it up with this imported stone from France." And I
Oh, my
went,
God.
"Oh, failure!" And he's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "How much did you spend on this stone when you have this beautiful natural material like right here staring at you in the face?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, good point." It's like, oh man, missed opportunity. So don't discount because something is ordinary or we see it all the time as that it can't be beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's really fascinating. In fact, I'm now thinking I need to go change my career. I got to go be an architect. It's full
Yes.
of, it's
Well,
full of,
another one.
That's what's exciting
Like-
about this, though. Like when we talk to these guests, like we can feel how excited you are about it. It makes
Yeah.
it awesome.
you know, and it's that intersection of like art and logic and problem solving that like is super really fun.
Yeah.
And Mike kind of mentioned, you know, you're mentioning the stuff for the people coming after you.
That's right.
What kind of stuff would you recommend to people who are listening to this who maybe are like, yeah, architect sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Like we know that you got an internship and you even mentioned it.
Yeah.
That internship is like
That was gold.
not
Change
normal.
change your trajectory, right?
100%.
Change your life.
So,
Absolutely did.
So knowing that internship could be as hard as it is, that you
And how
you know,
important it is.
yeah, and how
Yeah.
important it is.
Yeah.
What do you recommend for people who maybe are sitting there and going, I like to draw, I like to do this. Maybe
Right.
architecture's a thing. Like,
So that's a great question. It goes back to when I spent a lot of time mentoring younger people coming in. ASU's got a great program where they do a mentorship, and past couple years I've been involved with that. And I always ask them, what makes you different? Because if you're just copying what you see online, and then you're making buildings to look like that, all you are a copier machine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of copying in architecture. Let's be honest. We can go anywhere and see, oh, that looks like that, and oh, this really famous architect stole that idea from that person. It's everywhere.
When I did graphic design
That's right.
way back in the day, the thing that blew my mind was when they said, nothing's original.
That's right.
You're taking it from something you've seen somewhere, some way.
That's right.
So,
Yeah. So what I always try to encourage people to look at is, okay, so what makes you different? How do you step into that arena and set yourself apart? One of the biggest complaints you get from contractors is stupid architects, man, they don't know what they're doing. They don't how could you draw this detail and hope it's ever gonna, one, can I install it at all? Then two, if I have to maintain some piece of equipment, how do I get to it after putting your thing in, right? So I hear it all the time, and I was on job sites doing all the tinting. We did a lot of commercial work, and they were constantly complaining about stupid architects, right? It's like, man, maybe I could be that. Maybe I could be different. Maybe I can be the architect that does beautiful things, but also works, and I can put it together. And so if you don't know how to put things together, how could you possibly show a contractor how to put it together? And you'd hope, oh, well, the firm I'm going to work for, they're going to teach me how to do that. What if they don't know how to do it, right? What if you could bring something fresh to the table that's a fresh new idea, new way of looking at things that changes the entire industry, possibly, if that's the vision. So what I did, I grew up constantly building stuff. And so what I can tell people is, like, especially architecture, just build stuff. Even in school, if you're starting out, well, I don't have any experience. I didn't really grow up with anybody who was handy in my family. Every single project that I did in school, I built something to go along with it. Like, for example, I'd build these models that were beautiful. Everybody's laser cutting their models. No, I was at home hand cutting, doing my own things, building this. And they're like, hey, we got this scale of model. We only need something this big. I'd twice the scale it. And I made something big to stand out and be different, to show. Or here's your model. I'd built it so I could crack it open and show you the inside, right?
That's cool.
Take it to the next step so that you're doing something different. Does it take more time? Of course. But nothing worth doing doesn't require a sacrifice. So then the other thing I tell people is build something every project. So if you're starting off in school, I've got my first year in, I used to build the tables that I'd put the model on. And it's somehow related to the architecture of the space. Building stuff?
I forced him his first.
Yeah.
We always go back to this. We forced him to build a table.
That's awesome. So
I had to Google how to attach the drill bit to the drill.
Yeah. Well, what's funny about that is when I first started at Jones Studio, they were so tight on space that I built my own desk.
There you go.
Neil, he walks in and he goes, hey, we really don't have a place for you to sit. And so I was sitting at this like little desk up at the front, and I was like, this is going to work out. And I was like, hey, can I build the desk? And he's like, you could do that, but yes, I can.
You're like,
so the first thing I did for the first 2 days of working at Jones Studio, I built my desk. I went over in the back corner.
I love it.
And
Do you still use it?
Well, we're in a completely different office now, luckily.
He's upgraded.
Well, I was going to say, we know how this is.
I've upgraded. But so go back to materials. All of our desks are plywood. And you go, oh, it's plywood. But there's this really great artist, Donald Judd, that all of his art is made out of, he made this series of plywood chairs and furniture that's just this beautifully composed work, but it's all out of plywood.
It's like art, I bet,
That's right. Oh, it's gorgeous.
Like you're saying.
So you walk into our office, if you ever go, anybody that's starting off in architecture, we're super welcoming. Come by the office, ask for a tour, we'll walk you around.
I do want to walk in the red room someday.
Yeah, the red room, you got to have special permission to go to the back to the red room, so ask about that. But all of we call it our family table. Our whole entire table is made out of plywood, right? Everything's plywood, but you compose it in the right way. You have these gorgeous materials. And
awesome.
So I think one of the things that really stood out to me on the advice to people, right? We live in a very technological world, right? You can't take that away. AutoCAD.
Absolutely.
You're probably using tablets to
Rivet,
draw sometimes.
Nope.
No?
But
None.
But some are.
But some are, right?
Yeah.
Like, maybe not you,
Yeah,
but some.
that's right.
Right? Technology is not a bad thing.
Not at all.
But what I like is your advice was to scale it back. Go back to the roots of things.
First concepts.
Right? Get your hands dirty.
That's right.
Build things. See how that is. I think that's invaluable information for younger people, especially as they've grown up in a world of technology.
And they're only going to be growing up in tech.
Exactly.
That's right. There's also like a lot of research out there that as soon as your hand gets involved with something, it translates to your brain a lot better.
Yeah.
There's the tactileness of that. And so there's a lot of graphic designers that, we're doing the mouse thing, but you mentioned the tablet. Yep. A lot of graphic designers are still pencil on tablet because there's something tactile about being able to, like, the pressure of that pencil. Eddie Jones, the lead designer at the office, I work with him a lot, and he's always making fun of us. So, like, we'll have this beautiful render, and it'll take hours to put together, and he goes, I could have drawn that in, like, 10 minutes. And so he's the pencil guy. Yeah. He's not sitting there at a computer modeling in Revit and all the different softwares. He's doing everything in pencil. And so there's something magical about that ability to express vision with your hand.
Yeah.
And it's a quality that you can't get with the computer. However, I'm going to then flip that because I give him a hard time and say, well, you're asking me to give you all the wireframes that you set your perspectives on to draw on, right? You couldn't have done that without a computer. And so I think there's a really great, just like the pragmatism in art, there's a really great balance in architecture between hand expression and digital. Like, both do a lot of things for you, and you have to find the right tool in the right moment. But if you're so anti-technology, you're going to get left behind. And if you're so anti-hand, I want to be digital in everything, you're not going to see something that somebody who is working it out by hand first in an iterative process you may have missed by just being in the model. All of us have been like reading an email, and it's like somehow I missed this word that is obviously spelled wrong, but I read that email 4 or 5 times. I'm staring at a screen, but then you print it out and go, oh, that's obvious, right? There's something about being on paper and pen that you can't replace with the digital. So perfect synthesis between those two is really important.
Well, that segues into the next question I have, which is, so what's the future hold?
What's the future? So AI is obviously the low-hanging fruit, right? We've been talking about that quite a bit in our office. Believe it or not, kind of the champion in our office for AI is Eddie. And we just go, that's the last person I would have thought that would have been like excited about AI. But architecture is interesting with AI because you could absolutely input a whole series of parameters and have AI produce most of the buildings we have in our world. The houses, it's about efficiency of materials and efficiency of dollars. Most developers aren't thinking about creating beautiful, great spaces. There's great examples of that. The guys at Big Architecture from the Netherlands and Denmark, they started off as working for developers, but their architecture, if you go look at their stuff, they took the developer mindset of maximizing efficiency and profit and created beautiful architecture out of the modularity of that approach. And so the future of that, AI is certainly a tool that has to be leveraged. Just like anybody that was resistant to computers when they first came out and everybody was drawing drawings by hand, we have got a generation in the office that did that and remembers that. The architecture is 100% different now. Why would we go back to drawing drawings, drawing documents, plans by hand when we're so much more efficient and effective with the softwares we have now? I think in 10 years, maybe in 5 years, we're going to look back and go, how could we do this without AI? There's so many things that it can optimize and help us be more efficient. There's a lot of repetitive work in architecture. When you're setting up a set of drawings, you have to create all the sheets for your drawings. You have to create all the floor plans and all the cuts and all the sections and all the details. AI can help streamline that quite a bit. There's already a lot of great softwares that are leveraged specifically for that.
Do you think AI, so right now outsourcing from US to overseas or whatever in the architecture, that's kind of something that's, we've seen, right? Do you think AI will change that kind of?
I really think so. We've worked previously with some Chinese-based rendering farms that they'll kick out beautiful renderings really quick, because they've got like teams of 8, 10, 12 people that are just jamming this stuff through, highly talented with the technology. And you'll send something out at 5 o'clock one day, and then the next morning you'll wake up and it's like done. And you're like, how is this possible?
It's awesome.
Which is great,
yeah,
right?
It's great.
But it's all people driven using technology leveraged. And what we're finding now is a lot of the lead image generating companies, there's a software that we use called Enscape that couples, it's a plugin right into Revit. And so our models you can live walk through your model as if it was fully rendered actively like a video game.
Cool.
And we use that. We were just lamenting this morning that I'm a maker. Like I like making stuff. I made all my models in school. We've got a laser cutter and a 3D printer in our office. And the days of building models are just gone.
They're gone.
It is, and it's a sad thing.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sure the guy that produced the, Gutenberg printer, like was sad that monks can't write all the lettering down. No, like nobody's sad about that, right? Technology takes
sad
us
about
forward.
the old printing press.
That's right.
No longer, putting down each letter and it's just
mirror image. And
that's right. Yeah, nobody's that's
all the
driving a
errors
car goes, I wish I could have walked across the plains. It's like, no, we want cars. Like technology's good for us. But, you have to take it a step at a time. And so those softwares, Enscape, for example, they're putting a lot of AI built into those softwares now. And so you can start developing renderings and then adding stuff to it that otherwise you would have had to take to Photoshop and layer in as a post-production work. That's all now baking in the software itself.
That's cool.
And so they're taking a lot of those steps. So some of the skills that you would have had to leave school with as an architect, like, okay, you need to know Revit, you need to know AutoCAD, you need to know SketchUp, you need to know Rhino, you need to know all of these different, the Adobe suite.
The Adobe suite,
Yeah. All of these different things is now the technology is allowing that to be condensed down to 2 or 3 softwares as opposed to, I need to know 10.
Yeah.
right? Which, as a young student, you go, oh, how could I ever possibly do that? Well, YouTube's your friend. But other than that, it just takes time to work through those things.
Sitting behind it.
I feel like a student, or even like now, the learning is so short compared to like what it used to be. Like you're saying, somebody with 30 years, 40 years of experience has so much years of experience, right? But then there's a gap where they can't quite connect on the tech side. Then you get somebody that's young, and then all of a sudden they go right through it. Shout out to Matt right over here.
Yeah,
your
producer
from high school and up. He like blows everybody out of the water on things like just by simply because he's technology inclined, as opposed to somebody that's 20 years out.
That's right.
I'm still technology inclined, but not even close. It's the same.
And the difference there is like, you don't know what you don't know. The experience and confidence to be able to walk into a meeting with a client and talk intelligently about something. You may not be able to actually do all the software stuff yourself, but you need all aspects of a business, all aspects of a practice, of a studio. You need those people. You need people who are extremely technology driven. There's one particular person in our office, Kira, shout out. I trained her in Revit when she first started, and now she runs circles around everybody at the office. And it's like you become very valuable with the skills you have, but it takes time and practice and focus on a particular thing. But that's what I love about architecture, is because like I don't have to also be that. I don't also have to be this. I can have my skill set to be able to talk to people, work with clients and have good relationships, and also I get to design and do all those other pieces. But flip it, she also gets to do some of these other things I do, but she focuses primarily on this, and that's what makes a good studio, good team, and collaborative work.
We actually talk about that all the time here, because we try to make it so that not everybody's the exact same thing. Yeah, because if we have everybody who can do the same thing, there's somewhere where it's going to fall short.
That's right.
Because you just have 10 people doing this. They all have the same special skill set.
That's absolutely right.
There's a lot of collaboration that comes with having those different skill sets. Like Robert is really good at making stuff, and we've had a number of projects where I'm like, all right, we've got to test this panel. It's going to go on the facade of this building.
Right.
Air's going to go through it. It's going to make all this noise. Robert, help me build something to hold this panel up.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'll tell him like, this is what I've thought of, and he'll scratch his head and be like,
that's not gonna work at all.
We could do that.
Or I was gonna say that's usually what it is that will work.
Nice.
Yeah.
But to save on postage.
If we do this, it's a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
And because I try to make life easier.
You mentioned one other thing too about team, and basically it's not me or it's collaborative, but it's your team, right? Your architecture team, obviously client, your consultants, your contractors, but really how important is having the team?
Oh man, it's critical. I had an experience. Sometimes we have experience that just tells you what not to do as opposed to what to do. My very first project at a school, working with Jones Studio, I was mentoring. My mentor was a gentleman named Aaron Forbes. He was at Jones Studio. We were doing a project in Kingman together as a student services center. And the relationship of the team was volatile. We had a contractor that hated everything about us, hated design. He wanted to do car dealerships. That was his thing. But somehow he ended up on this project. We had an owner that was very concerned about anything that looked like it cost money as opposed to what it actually cost.
Sure.
And so we have this architect that's coming in here. They'd selected us to be the architect. They should have known from the beginning. But we had owner, architect, and contractor that nobody was on the same page. And so it often ended up in meetings, screaming matches in these meetings. And it cemented in my brain, this is not how I want to operate at all in the future. And so that was a great experience, a great bad experience for me to understand that the team is super critical, that everybody that comes to the table has got to have the same goals and the same vision for that project or the thing or the goal or whatever it is. And not only that, building the right team to support. There may be somebody talking the most in a meeting, but that person can only talk about that thing because 10 or 12 other people supported every graphic in that presentation, every design element. that team is hypercritical. And I think anybody who's in a leadership position that has a team behind them knows, man, if without this team, I would not be able to be where we're at. And I think from a leadership perspective, if you ever think that it's all about me, people know that right away.
Sure.
We all know those people that it's like, everything is about me and I'm just going to step on everybody behind me. Those are the worst people to work with. Nobody likes working with that. And so I've always tried to be the type of person that's like, how can I give the most amount of knowledge to those people who are coming up in architecture, to support them, make them better designers, make them better drafters, whoever they are. Because if they're better, everybody on the team's going to be better.
It's awesome.
So it's kind of the whole rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's another one of those things for the people coming after. Learn to work as a team.
That's right.
I mean, I can say we've all had it where we've sat in court cases, city council meetings, different things, and you get up there and you're like, all I've done is read this report. I didn't do the modeling.
Right.
I didn't do the field work. I didn't do a lot of it. I just helped write it, and then now I need to present it.
Yeah.
But it takes a great team to be able to say, this is all going to be correct.
Always. And it's very obvious when there's a bad team. And nobody likes being in that situation. So from my perspective, from a management standpoint, I always try to put together the best team, and then open communication and collaborative design decisions is always super critical. Every decision that has to be made on a project, if you bring the heads together and get everybody on the same page rather than forcing your idea through, always ends up better than if you think you have the best idea, so I'm going to force it, as opposed to, I got a good idea, let's see if anybody's got a better idea. Eddie Jones in our office is a great example of this. He's a collaborative designer. If there's a better idea that an intern has, that's the better idea, full stop. It's not better because it came out of my brain. It's better because it's better.
It's just better.
That's right.
Yeah, no, that's anybody who's doing architecture, wants to do architecture, go work with Rob. Clearly he knows what's going on.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. If it's not fun, you're probably doing it wrong. Let's be honest. Anything we do, anything that's worth doing is doing right? And so if you're just doing it and you're just miserable doing it, you're either doing it wrong or you're not fit for that type of job, for sure.
Well, Rob, we really appreciate you coming in. We're getting kind of low on our time.
Hey.
Is there anything you guys have for him? Or?
One thing I'll say, I would say this, that I've always appreciated about working with you guys is when we have our meetings, you allow the folks, not just us, but the folks that once you're done and you've committed whatever you're discussing, you understand time management.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I know we're not hitting on all the facets of what is important.
Right.
The team's super important. Everybody's individual components are important, and executing these projects are amazing. Take a look at Jones Studio if you haven't. But I'd also say the fact that you're cognizant of time is just, to me, like, it's super important.
One of the best assets we have is time.
Yeah.
And if we're wasting it, what are we doing?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Rob, is there anything you want to say to everybody
or
who
anybody
might be
out there
listening or watching, and to kind of leave them with?
The time as a young person coming up, especially if you're interested in architecture, the time to compromise is not in the first 6, 8, 10 years of your journey as a career. Huh. Now, you're always going to compromise, especially when you get married, right? You're always going to compromise. But don't compromise just because somebody tells you, that's not possible. No. Think outside the box. There's always a different way to do things, always a different way to come to a good solution that everybody can be happy with, if you're thinking outside of that box. And that box that the world puts us in is one of the biggest problems I think that we have, is we get rid of that box. Just don't even be in the box at all. Miracles are going to happen because of that.